Welcome to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. This is one of the world's busiest airports, transporting 1.5 million passengers a day, with planes landing and taking off every minute. Can you imagine what would happen if all these planes flew in and out of Dallas without an air traffic controller? This rarely happens thanks to the Air Traffic Control Tower. Personnel here work all day to coordinate the safe and timely movement of planes. Hence, the airport's smooth functioning depends on this tower. There are trillions of mini airports within each one of us, our cells. These cells are collectively responsible for the production and transport of proteins to different parts at different times. Can you guess what the air traffic control tower of a cell might be? It's a large, almost spherical structure inside the cell called the nucleus. Cells with a nucleus are called eukaryotic cells and are found in higher groups of organisms like plants and animals. Like the air traffic control tower, the nucleus controls all activities taking place inside a eukaryotic cell. However, instead of computer technology, it uses the information stored in the cell's genetic material, DNA. This DNA is found within a double membrane structure called the nuclear envelope. The nuclear envelope separates chromosomes and other contents of the nucleus from the rest of the cell. The nuclear envelope isn't a continuous structure, but has tiny pores that control the flow of materials going in and out of the nucleus. The nucleus is absent in lower groups of organisms like bacteria, and such cells are said to be prokaryotic. Since prokaryotic cells lack a nucleus, their DNA floats freely in their cytoplasm. Moving ahead, we will learn about eukaryotic cells. The cytoplasm is like the entire area of an airport, where all activities pertaining to departure and arrival take place. The cytoplasm is a jelly-like material present between the nucleus and the cell's outer boundary. This is the area where most cellular activity, like production of substances, transport of food and waste, etc., occurs. Additionally, the cytoplasm also gives the cell its shape and is the site of many chemical reactions necessary for life. Present within the cytoplasm of eukaryotic cells are many membrane-bound structures that carry out a specific function in the cell. These structures are called organelles. Organelles are critical to the cell's survival, and we will visit each of these as we go along. In order to board a flight, you must first get to the concourse of the airport, where your boarding pass and the tags for your baggage are produced by an attendant. The concourse in a cell is a network of membranes called the endoplasmic reticulum, and is the site where proteins are produced and assembled. Present on the endoplasmic reticulum are tiny attendants or organelles called ribosomes, which make proteins. Just like a plane needs fuel to fly, all processes in a cell, including production of proteins, require energy. This energy comes from glucose. Cells use the energy from glucose to do work. The organelle that breaks down glucose is called the mitochondrion. Mitochondria are membrane-bound organelles that are present inside all eukaryotic cells and are often called the energy centers or powerhouses of the cell. Their membrane is very similar to that of the nucleus. Can you spot the similarity? Like the nucleus, a mitochondrion is also surrounded by a double membrane. In a mitochondrion, the outer membrane is smooth, while the inner membrane has many folds, called cristae. The folds of the inner membrane increase the surface area for energy-producing chemical reactions to occur. The mitochondrion is also filled with a fluid called the matrix. Once the tag is produced at an airport counter, it is fixed to your baggage and sent off to its destination, your flight. The same has to happen with substances in a cell. They need to be packaged properly and tagged to end up at the right place. This work is done by an organelle called the Golgi apparatus. The entire organelle consists of membrane-bound stacks called cisternae. Once a protein is tagged, the Golgi apparatus sends it on its way by budding off vesicles containing the protein from its surface. This one's headed outside the cell. Before it can leave, it must pass through what is the cell's main entry and exit point, the cell membrane. This boundary of the cell is its point of contact with the outside environment. It's quite like the security or customs area of an airport, which decides what will and won't go through. The cell membrane or the plasma membrane is semi-permeable. What does semi-permeable imply about the cell membrane? This means that the membrane can either let a substance pass through freely, pass through to a limited extent, or not pass through at all. The plasma membrane prevents certain harmful substances from entering the cell, whereas vital substances, such as oxygen, glucose, and some proteins, are allowed to cross easily. Plant and animal cells are both eukaryotic and have many characteristics in common. What similarities do you see between them? Both possess a cell membrane, cytoplasm, and organelles, like the nucleus and mitochondria. Nevertheless, there are some important structural differences that can set these cells apart. Can you spot the most significant structural difference between this plant and animal cell? Plant cells have a structure outside the cell membrane called the cell wall. It is primarily made up of a complex sugar called cellulose. The cell wall is mainly impermeable in most parts, except for where there are tiny holes. These holes permit the movement of different substances. The rigid cell wall gives support and structure to the plant cell and its contents, much like our skeletal system does with our organs. It also performs another function which becomes apparent when you allow water to enter the plant cell and an animal cell. The animal cell expands till it bursts, as its flimsy cell membrane can't withstand the high pressure from inside the cell. When water enters a plant cell, it begins to swell, just like the animal cell, but it won't burst. Though the cell membrane expands, it stops when it reaches the cell wall. What do you think will happen when water leaves a plant and animal cell? The animal cell will shrink and appear smaller. Though the contents of the plant cell shrink and move away from the cell wall, its rigidity keeps the overall shape unchanged. Thus, the cell wall maintains the shape of the cell and forms the basic skeletal support for plants, which can get as enormous as this redwood tree. Another feature that sets plants and animal cells apart is the presence of an organelle called the chloroplast. Only plant cells have chloroplasts. Like mitochondria, chloroplasts are also double membrane-bound organelles and convert energy from one form to another. Within the chloroplast are disc-shaped structures called thylakoids, which are generally arranged in stacks. These stacks of thylakoids are called grana. Chloroplasts contain a green pigment called chlorophyll that converts light energy to chemical energy that is used to make food. This pigment within chloroplasts also gives plants their green color. Plant and animal cells have an organelle called the vacuole that is quite like a food cart on an airplane. A vacuole is a fluid-filled sac that serves as a storage area for the cell. It is much larger or more distinct in plant cells than in animal cells. Animal cells have numerous vacuoles, while plant cells have just one. Which of these do you think could be stored in a cell vacuole? A vacuole can store food that the cell may later use for survival. It also stores waste to prevent other parts of the cell from contamination. In plant cells, vacuoles store water as well as pigments that give flowers their colors. How can water storage in a vacuole affect the shape of any part of a plant, like this leaf, for example? The leaf droops when water is not available because vacuoles in the plant cells lose water and shrink. The shape, though, remains intact because of the cell wall. When the plant finds a new source of water, the vacuoles are refilled and the plant regains its structure. This table presents the major differences between plant and animal cells that we have just learned. Cells are of two basic types, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Eukaryotic cells have a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles like the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, and Golgi apparatus. Plant and animal cells are both eukaryotic, but show some structural differences. The mini airports within us have to work round the clock. We, fortunately, have the luxury of taking a break once in a while, and that's exactly what it's time for right now.